Mr. Carter?
That is so stipulated, yes, it's so stipulated, Your Honor, as up to the end of March 2021.
Okay, great. Let's go ahead and get started. Call your first witness.
Your Honor, just a second. I need to get my video back because apparently I clicked something wrong. When we get the message that we're being live streamed.
Okay.
This should just take a second.
Who is the witness?
Your Honor, we call Randy Lentz.
And Mr. Lynch, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Your Honor, I think I may need to be let back in. I apologize for my technical problem. There we go.
Can you spell your name for the record at the witness?
Yes, it's Lentz.
And first name is Randy?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. And let's restart the video. Okay. Let us know when you're ready for us to proceed, Your Honor.
I am ready.
Okay. Mr. Lentz, please introduce yourself to the court.
Yes, I'm Randy Lentz. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Medallion Midstream.
What does Medallion Midstream do?
Medallion Midstream operates crude oil and owns and operates crude oil and natural gas gathering systems primarily in the Permian Basin.
Who is the founder of Medallion Midstream?
I am.
What was your career background that led you to form Medallion?
I worked for midstream companies all of my career, and through the years have learned how to build, own, and operate midstream infrastructure.
How did you first get into the midstream business?
Right out of high school, I needed a better job to go to college, and I got a job with a natural gas gathering and processing company.
Where was that?
El Dorado, Texas.
Where is El Dorado, Texas?
It's south central Texas, south of San Angelo, Texas.
And since the age of 19, have you worked in the midstream pipeline business?
Yes, I have.
When did you form Medallion?
In 2010.
Okay. When you formed Medallion in 2010, was it an established company at that time?
No, it was a startup.
What was the business plan for the Medallion startup?
The business plan was to provide, actually construct, new build midstream infrastructure for our customers.
Has Medallion since 2010 built crude oil and natural gas pipeline infrastructure?
Yes, we have.
Where has Medallion done that?
Primarily the Permian Basin.
How many employees does Medallion have?
Approximately 170.
Where's Medallion based?
Irving, Texas.
Your Honor, we're going to show an exhibit now. We'd ask for screen sharing so that we can show Defendant's Exhibit 183.
Okay, Defendant 183.
Mr. Lentz, please identify Defendant's Exhibit 183.
This is the midstream infrastructure owned by Medallion Midstream.
Was any of this infrastructure built when you founded Medallion in 2010?
No, it was not.
How many miles of pipeline does Medallion have now?
In total, with everything that's on the page, over 1,400 miles, 1,400 miles.
How much capital has been invested to build out this pipeline infrastructure?
Over $1.5 billion.
Now, off to the west on this map, we see a red line that is labeled Medallion Delaware Basin Gas. How close is that to Orla? We've heard a lot about Orla in the case.
Yes. If you see the black square that says Pecos River Plant, That is about 5 miles east of the town of Orla.
We also see in green what is labeled as the Medallion Delaware Basin oil pipeline. Do you see that?
I do.
Is that different than the Delaware Express pipeline that we talked about yesterday with Mr. Wishaw?
Well, I think you're referring to Delaware Crossing.
Delaware Crossing, I mean.
That Mr. Wishaw was talking about. This is Medallion Delaware Express.
Okay. And is this a different pipeline than Delaware Crossing?
Yes, it is.
We've heard a little bit about Wink in the case. Can you describe where the Medallion Delaware Basin crude oil pipeline is in comparison to Wink?
Yes, if you see the west end of the green line, it says Eagle Eye Station. Wink would be approximately 20 to 25 miles north of that point.
We've heard a lot about WTL in the Delaware Basin. Does the Medallion Delaware Basin pipeline have a tariff?
Yes, it does.
And what qualities of crude oil are specified to be carried on Medallion's Delaware Basin pipeline?
WTI.
Why does the Medallion Delaware Basin crude oil pipeline specify WTI and not WTL?
The customers that we serve on this pipeline system only have WTI.
Have you evaluated getting WTL crude oil customers on the Medallion Delaware Basin crude oil pipeline?
Yes, we have.
Why has that not been done?
We have not received a request for proposal from a customer in that area that has adequate volumes of WTL to justify the economics for the capital spend.
Could you flow WTL on the Medallion Delaware Basin pipeline if you had a producer or a customer who wanted to flow a small amount, say 2,000 barrels a day?
Not as a segregated batch.
And why not?
Well, this is pipeline operations kind of 101 is currently our pipeline system is set up to, our pump stations are set up to move about 90,000 barrels a day of crude oil. And to operate it as a segregated batch, we would have to look at what we call the turn down of our pumps, so the minimum amount that those pumps could move. A 2,000 barrel segregated batch, we would not be able to operate the pumps on the pipeline because it would be below the lowest amount that those pumps could move. There's generally a rule of thumb that's like a 5-to-1 ratio. So at 90,000 barrels, we would be somewhere around 18,000 barrels a day would be the minimum amount that we could move.
What would happen with 2,000 barrels of WTL if you just put it into the common stream of Medallion's Delaware Basin pipeline?
It would get blended. We have so much WTI on that system that if you put 2,000 barrels of WTL into that, it would just be converted into a WTI.
Now let's look at the blue pipeline, the blue gathering system here, the Medallion Midland Basin gathering system. You testified before that Medallion had built over 1,400 miles or about 1,400 miles of pipelines. How many of those miles are in the Midland Basin gathering system?
Approximately 1,200.
Why has Medallion built so much of its system in the Midland Basin?
The Midland Basin side is been developed faster than the Delaware side. The geology there is simpler. It's more concentrated WTI, which is the most valuable oil being produced from the Permian Basin.
Does Medallion transport WTL on its Medallion Midland Basin gathering system?
No, it does not. None of our customers in the Midland Basin have WTI, and to my knowledge, is not produced in the Midland Basin.
I think you said that none of your customers have WTI. Is that?
Excuse me. They all have WTI. Yes.
Okay. Are you aware of there being any WTL producers in the Medallion Midland Basin?
No.
The Medallion Midland Basin pipeline map shows branches and offshoots. It is different than the EPIC pipeline map in that respect, because the EPIC pipeline map has some very long lines, straight lines. Why is that? Why is there a difference in what the pipeline systems look like?
The Medallion system is a crude oil gathering system. So we actually build our pipeline system out to producer batteries. These are batteries where the producers have their, oil coming out of the ground also contains gas and water, and they have batteries where they separate out those three components. And we build our pipeline system to the producer batteries and bring the oil into our gathering system, aggregate it, and then we can deliver that oil out of our system to long-haul pipes such as EPIC, where it can be moved to refineries and export facilities.
You mentioned taking the crude oil to long-haul pipes. Do we see on the Exhibit 183, Defendant's Exhibit 183, some identification of the locations that the Medallion gathering system will take crude oil to?
Yes, they're referred to on this map as hubs, and you can see up at the top right of the map, Colorado City Hub, where we can deliver into Energy Transfer's Permian Express, West Texas Gulf, Magellan's Bridge Tex line. Similarly, for example, you look down at the bottom left, you see the Crane Hub. We can deliver into Plains Cactus, P66 Gray Oak, EPIC, or Magellan's Longhorn system. And up at the top left, there's also pipelines we can deliver into at the top left at the Midland Hub into Enterprise, again, Permian Express, Plains Basin, and Centurion.
What are the endpoints of the long-haul pipes the Medallion can deliver crude oil into?
These long-haul pipes, the ones like, for example, at the Crane Hub, predominantly go to Corpus Christi. Magellan Longhorn goes to Houston. The other ones would be similar. They would go to Houston, or they would go to Cushing, Oklahoma. At what locations does Medallion physically interconnect into the EPIC pipeline? So we physically interconnect into EPIC at the Crane Hub. Also at, you see the dot just above that says Midkiff Station at approximately that point, and then also at the Harrington Station, which is just to the right of the Crane Hub.
Your Honor, I move admission of Defendant's Exhibit 183.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
183 submitted.
Does Medallion have a set of agreements with EPIC that govern? We can take down 183 for now. Does Medallion have a set of agreements that govern its relationship with EPIC?
Yes, we have a reciprocal capacity lease agreement and terminal services agreement.
Okay. And how did EPIC generally, high level, how did Medallion and EPIC come to have that reciprocal capacity lease agreement?
EPIC came to us because they were building their pipeline from Corpus Christi to the Permian Basin. That was set to go by Crane. If you remember the map that we just had up on the screen.
Let's put it up. Let's put it back up, actually. I took it down too early.
So EPIC's pipeline, as I mentioned, was coming very close to the Harrington Station by the Crane Hub in path toward the Delaware Basin. And they wanted to have on their tariff a Midland connection point. As you can see, our pipeline already traverses that path between, say, the Midland Hub and the Crane Hub. And so EPIC came to us and asked us if they could lease space on our pipeline in order to access Midland.
Can you describe at again, a very high level, what the terms were by which Medallion agreed to provide space on its gathering system to EPIC so that EPIC could connect up to the Midland area?
Yeah, so it was a reciprocal capacity.
Objection, Your Honor.
It was a reciprocal capacity lease agreement. Sorry, somebody saying something?
Is someone objecting?
Yeah, sorry, Your Honor. Matthew Scheck from Quinn Emanuel. That's I'm objecting because he's getting into parole evidence. Now, we believe that all of this should be admitted, but if he starts talking about the terms of the agreement and they've excluded evidence. They've moved to exclude evidence about the Epic Medallion relationship as well, and that's been excluded. So if he gets into this, this has to open the door.
Your Honor.
Why don't you rephrase the question?
Sure. Is there a reciprocal capacity lease agreement that relates to Epic's use of the Medallion pipeline?
Yes, there is.
Okay. And at a high level, in that reciprocal capacity lease agreement, can you describe what it is that Epic gets in that agreement?
Yes, they get 300,000 barrels a day of capacity on Medallion's pipeline system between Midland and Crane. And in exchange, Medallion gets 27,778 barrels of capacity on Epic's system from Epic's origin points that are stipulated in that agreement to the destination point at Corpus Christi.
How much
pipeline.
Okay. How much capacity does Epic actually have on Medallion's system now?
They still have the 300, but there was one of the points, Centurion, that they was never connected, and each individual receipt point has a limitation. And today, those two combined equate to approximately 250,000 barrels they have on the system.
Okay. How does that 250,000 barrels compare to the total capacity of the Medallion gathering system?
Today, Medallion's total capacity is approximately 1 million barrels a day, so 25%.
Does Epic pay any money for that capacity on Medallion's pipeline?
No.
Is there a 5 cent per barrel header fee in connection with that capacity?
Yes, sorry. There is a small, what's a 5 cent header fee for the barrels they actually move, and that's meant to offset some of our direct operating expenses. Doesn't really cover all of our direct operating expenses, but that's what it's meant to do. Covers things like electricity and chemicals.
How does 5 cents per barrel compare with the tariff rate for flowing crude oil on Medallion's pipeline?
If you averaged all these segments, and these segments are tariffed individually in our FERC tariffs, if you averaged them out, it would average out to approximately $1.20 per barrel.
What is the annual value of the 250,000 barrels of capacity that Epic now has on the Medallion system?
Well, on that basis, it would be over $100 million a year.
Now, you mentioned earlier Medallion's receipt of capacity on Epic's pipeline. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And in return, Epic received capacity on Medallion's pipeline. Was there construction that had to occur in order to make the capacity swap happen so that Epic could use Medallion's pipeline?
Yes, there was.
Did Epic pay Medallion for any portion of that construction?
The only thing they paid us for was reimbursement of the two stations that we were building that they were going to own. That was approximately $10 million.
Did Medallion have any capital costs to make that capacity swap happen that were not paid by Epic?
Yes, we spent approximately $31.5 million.
What did Medallion spend $31.5 million on to make the capacity swap happen?
We had to build additional pipelines between those two stations and our existing pipeline facilities. We had to expand our pipeline facilities. We had to make delivery connections, install pumps, measurement, things of that nature.
Did Medallion have to pay money directly to Epic for its capacity on Epic's pipeline and at Epic's terminal?
No. Our compensation for the money that we spent, the capacity that we were giving them that was in addition to the capacity we created with the $31.5 million was just the space on their pipeline.
Does Medallion have a use for the space, for its own business, for the space on Epic's pipeline?
No, we typically don't take title to any oil, so we wouldn't have oil to put on that space.
Okay. Now, just to be clear, I want to also tie up one thing. What is the length of term for which Epic? How long does Epic have capacity on Medallion's pipeline?
The term is 30 years, primary term, and the parties can agree for it to be extended for 10-year terms thereafter.
And what is the length of term for Medallion's capacity on Epic's pipeline?
It's 30 years.
When entering into the agreements with Epic, what did Medallion plan to do with the capacity that, and we can take down 183 now, I think, safely. What did Medallion plan to do with the capacity that it was going to receive on Epic's pipeline?
We plan to sell that to a marketer whose business was to purchase oil in the Permian and ship it to Corpus.
What companies did Medallion talk to about taking on the Epic capacity?
We talked to ARM, of course, Macquarie, Oxy.
Can you spell that for the record?
Yes, you're going to test my spelling. MCQUARIE.
Okay. Well, you said
did Medallion negotiate?
Well, what was the next one? Baxi, I think you said.
Oxy. OXY. Oxy is it's a marketing company that's affiliated with Occidental Petroleum.
Okay. Did Medallion negotiate terms for a potential deal with Macquarie?
Yes.
At a high level, what terms had Medallion discussed with Macquarie?
Macquarie was going to pay us $1.25 for both the transportation capacity on Epic and the terminaling services that we got from Epic.
Why did Medallion contract with ARM instead of Macquarie?
Because they were willing to pay us a higher per barrel fee.
What was the length of the term of the agreements that Medallion reached with ARM?
5 years.
Why did Medallion enter into a 5-year term agreement instead of just seeing what Medallion could get in the market for the pipeline and terminal capacity each month?
Well, we did not want to be exposed to any potential collapse of that spread between the Permian Basin and Corpus. So there's a market value of pipeline capacity from the Permian to the Gulf Coast. If you think back at that period of time, there were a lot of pipelines being built. If there's an overbuild of capacity, which our industry does a lot, then that would, the cost of moving a barrel from the Permian to the Gulf Coast could go down, especially if there was some type of, a shock to crude oil prices.
Did you believe that ARM was willing to take on the risk of a decline in the value of pipeline capacity between the Permian Basin and the Gulf Coast?
Yes, as a marketing company, that's inherent in their business model.
Would ARM receive the benefit of over the 5-year term of the agreements with Medallion if the value of the capacity had increased?
Yes, I think that was their point, is if they could lock in the value that was the market value at that time with us, and down the road there was more demand at the Gulf Coast, and the market value of that capacity went up, and they would be the beneficiary of that.
Did you have any concerns about contracting with ARM instead of Macquarie?
I did.
What were your concerns?
My concerns were that ARM was a regional marketer that we didn't have a lot of information on, as opposed to, say, a Macquarie or a Shell, which is a big international or a multinational type company that has a lot of financial stability. So we were concerned that if something changed in the market, we were worried about whether or not ARM could stand behind this agreement.
How did Medallion address its concern about ARM's credit?
So we insisted that ARM prepay part of this, so they had to put up about 20% of the value that we were to receive over 5 years as a prepay. And then we insisted that they put up 80% of the remaining value of the contract in form satisfactory to us, which could be cash, letters of credit, guarantees, some other form acceptable to us.
And what form acceptable to Medallion was put up for that 80% of the remaining 80%?
Yeah, they put up letters of credit, and then ultimately Glencore put up a parental guarantee, which was acceptable to us.
Now, I want to go back and talk a little bit about the reciprocal capacity lease agreement between Epic and Medallion. Let's look at Defendant's Exhibit 19. What is Defendant's Exhibit 19?
This is the reciprocal capacity lease agreement between Medallion and Epic, dated April 15th of 2019.
Was the Epic crude oil pipeline in service as of April 15, 2019?
No, it was not.
If we look at the page Bates numbered Medallion 3091, who signed the reciprocal capacity lease agreement for Medallion?
I did.
Did you read and understand the agreement before you signed it?
Yes, I did.
Who was responsible for drafting this agreement from Medallion's side?
On the drafting side, it's a complex agreement, so I hired an attorney group, Reed Smith, and we had two members of that law firm that helped us. I had Andrew Simmons, our in-house counsel at Medallion. Ben Daniel with Global Infrastructure Partners was involved, and myself.
Who were the attorneys at Reed Smith?
Peggy Haig and Diego Perez.
What was Peggy Haig's background?
Peggy had a lot of experience in not regulated and non-regulated natural gas and crude oil movements. At one point in time, she was the general counsel of El Paso, and had a wide experience in this type of an agreement.
Are you referring to El Paso
natural gas?
Natural gas. What was Mike Lastman's role with respect to this agreement?
He was kind of lead communicator with Epic at that point in time, was certainly involved in negotiations.
Did you look to Mr. Lastman to draft the contract?
No, as I said, these are complex agreements, and we needed a good legal team to help advise us on that.
Let's look at the page that is Bates numbered Medallion 3192. What is this section of the reciprocal capacity lease agreement?
It refers to Epic's rules and regulations tariff.
What is a rules and regulations tariff?
It is a tariff that is filed with the FERC, and it lays out, it governs the operations of the pipeline.
Have you ever participated in preparing a tariff before?
Yes, prepared our tariff, and we've been operating under those tariffs and amendments thereto for many years.
Are there other types of tariffs besides rules and regulations tariffs?
Yes, there's a rates tariff.
What is a rates tariff?
So a rates tariff kind of goes hand in glove with the rules and regulations tariff. Where the rules and regulations tariff stipulates the operations of the pipeline, the rates tariff discusses the service that's being offered, the points of origin, the points of the destination points or delivery points, if you will, and the rates that will be charged for those services from origin to destination.
Is there also a form rates tariff for Epic attached to the reciprocal capacity lease agreement?
Yes.
So in this Exhibit G, this form rules and regulations tariff attached to the reciprocal capacity lease agreement, let's look at the page that is Bates numbered 3222. What is this section on page 3222?
This is in the tariff carrier's product specifications.
Do you see the references to common stream products shipped from groups 1 to 3?
Yes.
What are groups 1 and 3?
So group 1 was the origin points in the Permian Basin, and group 3 would have been the destination at the Gulf Coast.
Okay. And what we see here, 2 different common stream products shipped from groups 1 to 3 sections in the form EPIC tariff. What does this tariff say about the quality of crude oil that will be offered on the EPIC pipeline going from group 1 to 3?
So Permian Common Stream 1 was to have an API gravity of 36 to 44, and that's commonly known as WTI. And then Permian Common Stream 2, 44.1 to 48, which is commonly referred to as WTL.
If we look back at Article 5.5A of the Reciprocal Capacity Lease Agreement, does Article 5.5A reference this Exhibit G that we just looked at?
Yes, it does.
And what does Article 5.5A of the Reciprocal Capacity Lease Agreement say?
That EPIC represents and warrants that the EPIC rules and regulations tariff and the EPIC rates tariff will be filed with the FERC in the form of Exhibit G and Exhibit H, respectively, for services on the EPIC pipeline.
Okay. Now, if we look down to Article 5.6 of this agreement, what does Article 5.6 say?
That except as required by applicable law, EPIC and Medallion each agree that they will not revise the EPIC tariff and the Medallion tariff, respectively, in a manner that would have a material adverse impact on the rights and obligations of the parties under this agreement.
Are you aware that EPIC in late 2020 amended its rules and regulations tariff by adding a footnote that said Carrier does not currently offer service under the WTL common stream?
Yes.
Has Medallion ever taken the position with EPIC that that change in EPIC's tariff had a material adverse impact?
No, we have not.
Why not?
It was logical to us at that point in time. We weren't aware of WTL in quantities that could be moved from the connections, the origin points that EPIC had, onto EPIC and the quantities that were required under EPIC's tariff.
Now let's go to another exhibit, which is Defendant's Exhibit 698. Please identify Defendant's Exhibit 698.
Now, this is the First Amendment to the Reciprocal Capacity Lease Agreement between Medallion and EPIC.
What is the date of this amendment?
It's April 5th. It's referring to the April 15th agreement, but the date is of the amendment's June 3rd, 2019.
Was this during that time period between Medallion entering into the Reciprocal Capacity Lease Agreement with EPIC and then entering into the Transportation Services Agreement with ARM?
Yes.
If we look on this first page of the First Amendment to the Reciprocal Capacity Lease Agreement down at Article 3.5, you see that there is a provision down here about quality. You see that?
Yes.
This provision says that, the last sentence of this provision says all crude petroleum tendered to EPIC for the account of Medallion at all other EPIC origin points shall conform to the quality specifications set forth in the EPIC tariff for such points. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay. And was that an important provision for EPIC?
Yeah, it was. To summarize what we were doing here with this amendment is that we realized that we had made a drafting error and that the quality provisions were referring to Medallion's tariff for all origin points. The intent of the parties was that the Medallion tariff quality specifications would govern for the origin points that were coming into Medallion, and that the EPIC quality specifications needed to govern all other origin points so that WTL could be shipped from those other origin points on the EPIC pipeline.
And what quality specifications were provided by the Medallion tariff?
WTI only.
I move admission of Defendant's Exhibit 698.
Defendant 698, is that what you said?
Yes, Your Honor.
Any objection to defendant 698?
No objection, Your Honor.
Defendant 698 is admitted.
Let's look now at Defendant's Exhibit 1. What is the date of Defendant's Exhibit 1?
July 3rd of 2019.
And is this the Transportation Services Agreement that we've been talking about in this case?
Yes, it is.
How long elapsed between the Reciprocal Capacity Lease Agreement? What length of time elapsed between the Reciprocal Capacity Lease Agreement between Medallion and EPIC and the Transportation Services Agreement between Medallion and ARM?
Approximately 2.5 months.
If you look at the page that is page numbered Medallion 5968, who signed the Transportation Services Agreement for Medallion?
I did.
Did you read and understand the Transportation Services Agreement before you signed it?
Yes, I did.
Who was responsible on Medallion's side for drafting the Transportation Services Agreement?
The same group that I mentioned previously, Reed Smith, Peggy Haig, Diego Perez, Andrew Simmons, myself, and Ben Daniel with GIP.
What was Mike Lassman's role with respect to the Transportation Services Agreement?
He was a negotiator, communicator with ARM as well.
Did you look to Mike to draft the Mike Lassman to draft the Transportation Services Agreement with ARM?
No, I did not.
Why not?
Once again, these agreements are complex. We were relying on our legal team to make sure that we got into the agreement exactly what we were intending to get into the agreement.
We looked at the form tariff Exhibit G attached to the Reciprocal Capacity Lease Agreement between Medallion and EPIC that had a WTL specification. Is there any form tariff attached to the Transportation Services Agreement between Medallion and ARM?
No.
On the first page of the Transportation Services Agreement between Medallion and ARM, let's look at the third whereas clause. What does the third whereas clause say?
Carrier and EPIC have entered into that certain reciprocal capacity lease agreement dated April 15, 2019, capacity lease agreement, whereby Carrier has leased from EPIC certain capacity on the EPIC pipeline, the lease capacity.
And if we turn, you see the phrase, that term leased capacity?
Yes.
Okay. If we turn to Article 11.01 on page 16, do we see the term leased capacity used in here?
Yes.
Okay. What does it say? What does the first sentence say about leased capacity?
That it will be operated as an integrated portion of Carrier's common carrier pipeline, and shippers' rights hereunder shall be subject to all laws related to and governing the operation of common carrier pipelines, including without limitation laws and regulations that prevent discrimination in favor of any given shipper or the provision of service for consideration other than the rates set forth in a published tariff.
Is Medallion a common carrier pipeline?
Yes, it is.
What does that mean?
It means we offer services to third parties pursuant to our tariff.
Let's look at the next sentence of this provision. What does the next sentence say?
The tariff shall apply to the service provided hereunder, and if there is a conflict between a provision of this agreement and the tariff, the latter shall apply, provided that in each instance, shippers shall be deemed to be a committed firm shipper under the tariff.
Okay. And is tariff capital T defined in this agreement?
Yes.
Okay. Let's take a look back in the definition section real quick. What tariff is being referred to here?
Medallion's tariff.
Okay. Did Medallion plan to change its tariff to account for the fact that there would be leased capacity that would be used pursuant to the terms of Medallion's tariff?
Yes.
Okay. Are there other provisions of the Transportation Services Agreement that reference tariff requirements?
Yes.
Let's look at the first sentence of Article 2.01. What does the first sentence of Article 2.01 say about tariffs?
Yeah. Subject to the provisions of this agreement, carriers shall provide committed firm service for the committed volume for the transportation of crude petroleum from the origin points to the destination points in accordance with and subject to the tariff, which is incorporated herein by reference and constitutes part of this agreement. I can keep reading if you'd like me to.
That's fine. One of the capitalized terms in Article 2.01 is crude petroleum. Do you see that?
Yes.
Is there a definition of crude petroleum in the Transportation Services Agreement?
Yes.
Let's look at that real quick. How does the Transportation Services Agreement define crude petroleum?
It defines it as crude petroleum which meets the specifications established in the tariff for transportation from the origin points to the destination points.
And is the agreement there using that capitalized term tariff again?
Yes.
Which we've already looked at, right?
Yes, sir.
There is a term there, origin points. What is, just generally, what is an origin point?
The point at which a shipper will tender oil for receipt by the pipeline.
Another capitalized term in, we had looked at Article 2.01, another, if we could turn back to that real quick. You see that there's another capitalized term there, which is committed firm service?
Yes.
And is that also a defined term in the Transportation Services Agreement?
Yes, it is.
Let's look at that back on page 3. What is the definition that is provided in the Transportation Services Agreement of committed firm service?
It means priority capacity that is equivalent to the highest level of service offered or provided by EPIC Pipeline.
Do tariffs typically define the quality of crude oil as part of the services that are provided?
Yes.
Did Medallion agree to provide, well, was it your understanding that Medallion agreed to provide any service per arm that was not being offered or provided by EPIC?
No.
Could physically Medallion agree to transport a quality of crude oil that EPIC was not offering or providing transport for?
No, they were in charge of operating their pipeline pursuant to their own tariff.
Okay. Let's look at Article 2.04 of the Transportation Services Agreement. What does the first sentence of Article 2.04 say?
During the term, carrier will transport crude petroleum in accordance with the terms of this agreement and the tariff.
And we see again there those defined terms, crude petroleum and tariff?
Yes.
And finally, let's look at Article 3.01C. What does Article 3.01C say?
Shippers' nominations and tenders of crude petroleum for shipment and carrier scheduling, acceptance, transporting, measuring, and delivering of crude petroleum shall at all times be subject to and implemented in accordance with the tariff, and shipper agrees to comply with the tariff. Tariff is subject to amendment by carrier in accordance with Section 15.10.
Okay. And again, do we see the capitalized terms tariff and crude petroleum?
Yes.
And there's a provision relating to amendment of the tariff, is that right?
Yes.
Was the EPIC pipeline in service as of the date of the Transportation Services Agreement, July 3rd, 2019?
No.
How are Medallion and NARM going to know when services commenced?
EPIC was to provide us with notice in advance of that.
Let's look at Article 4.02 of the Transportation Services Agreement. What does the first sentence of Article 4.02 say?
The commencement date shall be the date provided by EPIC through notice to carrier on which the EPIC pipeline is available to provide commercial operations from any of the origin points to any destination points. Carrier should provide at least 30 days prior written notice of the anticipated commencement date.
Okay.
Commencement date notice.
Okay. What date ended up being the commencement date for the transportation services under the Transportation Services Agreement?
April 1st, 2020.
All right. Thank you. You can take down Defendant's Exhibit 1 now. What was the state of the pipeline transportation market as of April 1, 2020?
It was not good. We were in COVID. Crude oil prices had collapsed. Producers were shutting in. They didn't want to sell their oil when the price had dropped to $20 a barrel or less. Subsequently, the pipeline transportation demand was dropping, and the industry was generally in disarray.
You mentioned earlier the Medallion planned to revise its tariff in connection with the leased capacity on the EPIC pipeline when services commenced. Did Medallion do that?
Yes, we did.
Let's look at Defendant's Exhibit 8. What is Defendant's Exhibit 8?
This is Medallion Pipeline's tariff effective April 1st of 2020.
If we look kind of toward the bottom of the first page, who issued and compiled Medallion's tariff?
I did.
And the effective date is April 1, 2020?
Yes.
Had there been a prior version of the Medallion tariff?
Yes, there had been several prior versions.
How can we tell what was revised in this tariff version as compared to prior versions?
Changes are redlined, insertions are underlined, and deletions are struck through.
If we look on page 4 of Defendant's Exhibit 8, are there examples of changes from the prior version of the Medallion tariff?
Yes.
Can you read the well, in the first sentence, what language did you add?
Except for nominations for transportation utilizing the lease capacity from certain EPIC origin points as indicated below.
Okay. And then below, what language did you insert below?
For nominations for transportation utilizing the lease capacity from EPIC origin points other than the excluded origin points, crude petroleum means product meeting the specifications established in the then effective FERC local rules and regulations tariff of EPIC Crude Pipeline LP.
And just briefly, what are the excluded origin points?
Excluded origin points, as we discussed previously, are the points where oil is entering physically Medallion's pipeline into the lease capacity for delivery to EPIC. And remember, our system is only WTI. So we had to exclude those points from any WTL nomination, effectively.
Let's look at page 8 of Defendant's Exhibit 8. And is there an addition on this page as well?
Yes.
What does the addition on this page say?
With respect to transportation utilizing the lease capacity, crude petroleum shall be accepted for transportation under EPIC's Permian Common Stream 1 and Permian Common Stream 2 from EPIC origin points other than the excluded origin points pursuant to the quality specifications of the EPIC rules and regulations tariff. Crude petroleum utilizing the lease capacity from the excluded origin points shall be accepted for for transportation only when such crude petroleum meets the quality specifications in this rule.
The language that was added references the EPIC rules and regulations tariff. Was there an EPIC rules and regulations tariff that was put into place for all the capacity on the EPIC pipeline, not just the leased capacity?
Yes.
And was just to understand the tariff document, is the medallion tariff subject to change and amendment?
Yes, and so was EPIC's.
Okay. And if we look up in the upper right-hand corner of this page, you see where it says FERC number 1.5.0. Do you see that?
Yes.
What does that language mean?
It means that this tariff has been revised at least 5 times.
How would the numbering work as the revisions are made?
That it would, instead of saying 1.5, it'd say 1.6.
Is that unusual for tariffs to be revised over time?
No, it's very common. These are very long term, and as conditions change, again, these are FERC agreements. They're common carrier pipelines, and they have to evolve to some degree as circumstances evolve.
Okay. So let's look at Defendant's Exhibit 10.
Wait. Go back to that. So I'm trying to figure out what this means because there's so many. So it says, with respect to transportation utilizing the lease capacity, crude petroleum shall be accepted for transportation under EPIC, Permian, Common Stream 1. And so that's WTI and WTL, correct?
Yes, sir.
Other than the wait, what?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And then it says, other than the excluded origin points. And what does that mean exactly?
So the origin point, the excluded origin points were the origin points where oil was entering physically Medallion's pipeline. So EPIC had leased space on Medallion's pipeline to make that move between Midland and Crane. But because Medallion's pipeline only carries WTI, we couldn't allow for a shipper to move WTL from those origin points to access EPIC. So those are the excluded origin points at which you can really only move WTI into EPIC. All other origin points, except for the excluded origin points, you can move both Common Stream 1, WTI, and Common Stream 2, WTL, on the EPIC pipeline.
Go back to that map that has the Delaware, the 2 Delaware basin, and yeah. So kind of explain that provision in relationship to this map.
Sure. And do we have a map that shows EPIC that we can overlay on this anywhere?
Your Honor, we do have a map that can show how they all fit together if you would like that.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Can we blow that up a little
Yeah,
bit?
maybe we can blow up the West Texas part, yeah.
Right. Okay. So EPIC's pipeline here is shown in orange. So you can see that origin points on the EPIC pipeline can be at Orla, they can be at Wink. There are other origin points not shown here, but think about it like that. And then as the orange line comes across Medallion's pipeline system, Medallion has the connections that we referenced directly into EPIC, okay? But under EPIC's tariff, if you're a shipper, you can access EPIC at Midland as well. But that oil is physically, if you see the Midland hub dot, that oil is physically going into Medallion's pipeline first before we deliver it into EPIC. So because our system, all the oil on that system is WTI, and we do not carry WTL, we wanted to make sure that a shipper who wanted to access EPIC at any of the points that were physically being delivered into Medallion first could not move WTL. Those could only be WTI.
So
The amendment we made.
Wait. So the areas, where are the areas on this map that WTL could be shipped on the EPIC line? Would it be like only the Orla terminal?
Yes, sir. Orla, Wink, and there were other origin points it would be any origin point shown on EPIC's tariff for groups 1, 2, 3, except for those that are excluded, which are those that are coming into the Medallion pipeline, because we just had WTI. All other points of origin, WTL could be moved.
Okay, you had me there until the very end. So I understand on the Midland, the Medallion Midland Basin, that's all WTI. Orla and a Wink, I guess, could be WTL. Are you saying that, for example, if ARM had purchased oil from and transported on other feeder pipelines, like they could have, as long as it got to Wink or Orla, it could potentially have been transported, WTL could have been transported from those origin points?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
If those interconnecting pipelines were also shipping WTL, but yes, we were only excluding Medallions, the points that came into Medallion for WTL service. Everything else, yes, they could move WTL service from any of those other points theoretically.
But if they wanted to ship from the Orla terminal, isn't it connected to for example, think of these names all, Medallion, Delaware, Basin Gas?
No, it's not connected there. This would be a point where, we'll talk about this, but like the Salt Creek system or at Wink, I think the plaintiff has referred to Delaware Crossing. If those points were in service, if there was WTL that could be moved from those pipelines into EPIC at those points, then yes, they could ship WTL as long as they complied with the other provisions of the tariff.
Of EPIC's tariff?
Yes, sir, because we incorporated all of EPIC's tariff into this, yes.
Okay. All right, go. You can resume.
So on this issue of origin points, why don't we look at Defendant's Exhibit 12? What is Defendant's Exhibit 12?
It is the EPIC crude pipeline local rates tariff.
And what is the date of this local rates tariff?
April 1st of 2020.
Okay. And remember, before we briefly touched on the difference between rules and regulations tariff and a rates tariff. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And can you again just explain what is in brief, what is the difference? What makes a local rates tariff different than a rules and regulations tariff?
The rates tariff is really just defining the points of origin, points of destination, and the rate. So the fee that the pipeline intends to charge for the service of moving oil between those origin points and destination points.
Now let's look at the third page of Defendant's Exhibit 12, the April 1, 2020 EPIC local rates tariff. You see that?
Yes.
And then remember we talked about Group 1, that term Group 1 before?
Yes.
And what is Group 1?
So these Group 1 would be the origin points in the Permian Basin where a shipper would tender oil to the pipeline, and the pipeline could receive oil from the shipper.
How many Group 1 origin points are listed in the April 1, 2020 EPIC local rates tariff?
9.
Now, if we look at the names of these origin points, several of them are described as interconnections. Looks like all of them but 2 are described as interconnections, and 2 are described as truck unloading facilities. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. What is the difference between an interconnection and a truck unloading facility?
Well, an interconnection, in this case, the EPIC pipeline would be receiving oil from another pipeline. The truck unloading is there's not a pipeline there. Oil is being brought in by trucks and unloaded into the pipeline.
Now, there are 9 origin points, but how many towns are listed as locations for origin points under the EPIC pipeline?
Could you repeat that question? How many towns?
Sometimes my questions don't come out right. Do you see the second column, which is town?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, so how many different towns are listed in the EPIC local rates tariff?
Looks like 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay. So what are the names of the towns that are listed?
Crane, Midland, Orla, and Wink.
And just to kind of get ourselves oriented, let's go back to the demonstrative that has all the pipelines together. Okay. Can you identify? We seek Orla, correct?
Yes, Orla is the far left.
All right. We see Wink.
Wink, yep, in the middle.
Okay. And then we see Midland, correct?
Yes, and that would have been points that were excluded for WTL.
So all of the Midland origin points are excluded origin points. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then we see Medallion's Crane Hub.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe generally where the EPIC crane terminal was?
Well, the crane terminal was really where we put barrels into EPIC are the 3 spots. One is very close to where you see that green dot that says Crane Hub. The other one is where you see the black dot that says Midkiff Station. And then you see the square that says Upton Terminal. That Upton Terminal is EPIC's Upton Terminal. And then also we were putting barrels in to EPIC at the Harrington Station.
In the Defendant's Exhibit 12, the April 1, 2020 EPIC local rates tariff, how many of these locations, how many of the towns are west of Crane?
Just 2, Orla and Wink.
Okay, if we look at the map, we see the 2 towns, Orla and Wink, and they flow down with separate lines to the Crane area?
Yes.
Okay. Now let's go back to the local rates tariff. Okay. Let's talk about the interconnections. You recall how many of the 9 origin points were interconnections?
Yes.
Okay. How many of the
7 that are interconnections.
Okay, and these are pipeline interconnections, is that right?
Yes.
Now, were all 7 of these pipeline interconnections in service into the EPIC pipeline as of April 1, 2020?
No.
Which ones were not in service?
Anything that has a designation of the number 1 beside it was not in service.
Okay. So of these 7 interconnections, how many were actually in service as of April 1, 2020?
5.
Okay. I see one Oryx interconnection with the number 1 next to it. You see that?
Yes, it's not in service.
Okay. Are there any others that are not in service among the interconnections?
Yes, the Oryx interconnection at Crane. So Oryx was a gathering system that gathered oil from the Delaware, and it was not in service.
So if we look specifically at the Oryx interconnection, it's got a number 1 next to it. Let's go down to the next page and look at what it says next to that number 1. What does number 1 signify?
Not yet in service.
Okay. So if we go back to the list of origin and delivery points by group, how many of these are excluded origin points? In other words, they connect through a medallion pipeline.
4.
Okay. Which of these are excluded origin points?
All right, so the excluded origin points would be where it says Crane Medallion Pipeline Company, LLC, interconnection, not that one, the next one. That one. If we drop down to the one that says New Star, that one, and the one that says Reliance, that one.
Okay.
So yeah, I may have overcounted here. 3.
Okay. And is there another origin point that is a medallion interconnect that is not an excluded origin point?
Yes, that is Medallion Delaware Express, our pipeline system out in the Delaware.
Okay. And that was the one we looked at on the map before.
Yes.
And does that one carry WTL?
No, our tariff only specifies WTI. We just didn't exclude it at the time.
Okay. So we've talked about the Oryx interconnection, which had a 1 for not in service. Now let me ask you this. Did that Oryx interconnection ever go into service?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. So we've looked at that one, and we've looked at the 4 medallion ones. Let's look at the other interconnections. Do you see the one down at the bottom for Wink, Delaware Crossing interconnection? Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware of the Delaware Crossing pipeline offering any WTL service in 2020 or 2021?
I'm not aware of it, no.
Okay. And at the top, you see the Advantage pipeline interconnection?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware of the Advantage pipeline interconnection offering any WTL service in 2020 or 2021?
No.
Let's talk now about the, just to wrap that up, on any of these pipeline interconnections, are you aware of any of them having WTL service in 2020 or 2021?
No.
Okay. Now, we've looked at these 7 pipeline interconnection points, but we have not yet looked at the truck unloading facilities. So let's look at those. What is the name of the first truck unloading facility?
It's Crane. It's the Epic Crude Terminal Crane Truck Unloading Facility.
Okay, and then what is the second one?
It's Orla Epic Crude Terminal Orla Truck Unloading Facility.
Was the Orla Truck Unloading Facility in service as of April 1, 2020?
According to the number 1, no.
Okay. Now, we do not see a number 1 next to the Epic Crude Terminal Company Crane Trucking Unloading Facility. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, we talked a little bit, Mr. Patterson talked a little bit with one of ARM's experts yesterday about trucking. How many barrels of crude oil can be loaded onto a typical tanker truck at a time?
Approximately 180.
Okay. The truck unloading facility in Crane, about how far is that from the areas where WTL is prevalent?
Well, from if you just say from Orla to Crane, it'd be approximately 100 miles.
Okay. Has Medallion ever considered trucking crude oil out of the Orla area?
We have.
Okay. And what were the circumstances when Medallion considered trucking oil out of Orla?
Well, we have a gas plant, as you saw from the previous map, and we were looking about the viability of taking condensate from our gas plant and blending that in with some of our WTI over on the Medallion Delaware Express system, and we looked at it for that particular project.
Let's look at the demonstrative map. So you see is the Pecos River plant that you're referring to on here?
Yes, and we were looking at trucking that to our Eagle Eye station.
Okay. And where is that Eagle Eye station?
You see it there at the far left of our green line, or at the very end of our green line.
How far is that approximately from the Pecos River plant to the Eagle Eye station?
We estimated it at approximately 50 miles.
Okay. And how does that distance compare with the distance from Orla to Crane?
Approximately half.
Okay. Did Medallion decide to truck condensate from its Pecos River plant to the Eagle Eye station?
No.
Why not?
The costs were prohibitive. It was going to cost us $2.50 to $3 a barrel to truck that barrel from the Pecos plant to Eagle Eye, and that was going to eat up, basically the spread, the difference in, the posted difference between the price for purchasing WTL and the value of WTI.
What are the components of cost? What are the major components of cost that make up that $2.50 per barrel?
Well, I mean, a lot of it's just labor. This is kind of fixed cost. Our experience is that, if you're going even 1 mile, it's usually $1.50. They won't even get in the truck and for less than $1.50 a barrel. And then they just tack on the additional mileage onto that, fuel, labor costs primarily.
And was there also incremental extra costs that would have been associated with shipping the oil even further?
Yes, if you were shipping it all the way to Crane, my estimation, that cost would double because it's double the distance.
Does Medallion have truck unloading facilities for its own gathering system?
We do.
And how are those truck unloading facilities used by Medallion's customers?
Well, because, if there's a big quantity of oil, then the economics are usually there to pipeline connected. So oil that's coming into truck unload stations is typically smaller quantities of oil. My experience is usually from vertical wells, or it's something that's being trucked on a temporary basis, waiting on a pipeline connection, but just temporary in nature and smaller in volume.
Which is a more efficient form of transportation, trucking or pipeline?
Pipeline.
Is it even close?
No, it's not.
Okay. Back to we had looked at the Epic truck unloading facility at Crane and the local rates tariff. Could ARM or Glencore have procured WTL and shipped it by truck to Crane for shipment on the Epic pipeline?
In theory, yes.
Okay. Would that have made any sense?
Not to me. Again, the cost would have totally nullified the benefit, and there would have been other physical factors to consider as well. I'm not sure what the capacity of Epic's unload facilities are. They would have to also be able to receive that many trucks.
Are you aware of ARM or Glencore ever expressing an interest in nominating WTL into an Epic truck facility?
No, I'm not.
Now let's go to Defendant's Exhibit 10. Can you identify, or please identify Defendant's Exhibit 10?
This is Epic Crude Pipelines Rules and Regulations tariff. Governs their pipeline effective April 1st of 2020.
And if we look at the page that is Bates numbered Medallion 2301, do you see Rule 13 nominations required?
I do.
What is a nomination?
A nomination is a notice that a shipper has to put in to the carrier that identifies the quantity of oil that the shipper would intend to ship on the pipeline for the forthcoming month, and it would identify the quantity and the origin and destination point and the quality.
How were nominations handled among the four companies, ARM, Glencore, Epic, Medallion, just in terms of the flow of information over the course of this deal?
We had agreed that the ARM and then later Glencore could communicate directly with Epic and vice versa. It didn't make any sense for Medallion to be in the middle.
Does Rule 13 provide a deadline for nominations?
Yes, it's the 15th day of the month preceding the month during which the transportation under the nomination is to begin. So, for example, if they were making a nomination for the month of February, they would have to have that nomination in prior to the 15th day of January.
Did this Exhibit 10, the Epic April 1, 2020 Rules and Regulations Tariff, include WTL in the specifications section?
Yes.
Okay. And if we see, still on Rule 13, see that there's a minimum aggregate nomination amount?
Yes.
For a common stream nomination, do you see that?
Yes.
And what is the minimum aggregate nomination amount?
For nominations into the common stream, it's 2,000 barrels per day.
Would 2,000 barrels per day be a large enough nomination to maintain WTL as a separate product in the Epic pipeline in 2020 or in 2021?
No.
Why do you say that?
Well, 2,000 barrels a day is enough for them to be able to move it as a segregated batch. And if you take 2,000 barrels a day of WTL and you put it into a large stream of WTI, you would simply convert the WTL into a WTI quality.
Are you aware of Epic shipping any WTL during the time period from April 1, 2020 to April 1, 2021?
No.
Are you aware of Epic treating any other shippers more favorably than Glencore during that time period with respect to WTL service?
No.
Let's turn back now to page 33 of Defendant's Exhibit 10. What is this page?
This is carrier's product specification.
And in fact, is this a multi-page, a 2 or 3 page section at the back of the tariff?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And if we look on page 33, what are the qualities of crude oil that are listed in Exhibit B here? We can look at the qualities of that.
It's common. Okay, for common stream 1 is WTI, as we've established, and common stream 2 is WTL.
Okay. And then down underneath, just make sure that the document is clear. We also see these groups 2 to group 3 specifications, correct?
Yes.
And what is group 2?
It's for origin points, is defined here from the Eagle Ford, not from the Permian.
Okay. Does Epic go through the Eagle Ford area in South Texas on the way to Corpus?
It does.
All right, but is anything in this case about the Eagle Ford?
No, sir.
Okay. Let's go to the second page of the specifications. Do you see there's a sentence there that says, there's a paragraph that begins with the words, the gravity, viscosity, etc.?
Yes.
Can you read that?
The gravity, viscosity, pour point, and other characteristics of all accepted crude petroleum must be readily amenable for transportation through the carrier's existing facilities and will not materially affect the quality of other shipments or cause disadvantage to other shippers and or the carrier. If crude petroleum is accepted from tankage, settled bottoms in such tanks must be above a 0.4 inches below the bottom of the pipeline connection with the tank from which it enters carrier's facilities.
If
Why don't we go ahead and
a
take-
shipper,
wait. Well, why don't we go ahead and take our morning break?
very good.
Okay, let's reconvene. Okay, let's proceed.
Mr. Lentz, can you explain the logistical challenges of operating a pipeline with respect to crude oil quality?
Yes. So, these are complex physical challenges. If you have a pipeline that is moving, so for example, in the instance of Medallion's pipeline, if you are moving a quality of oil such as WTI, and you are going to batch a different quality, then you have to know a lot of detail about what the shippers who are going to move that other quality of oil. You're going to have to talk to them in great detail. You have to be certain of the line fill for that other quality, the assurance that they have that oil, because once you stop someone else's oil from moving, you have a certain period of time that you have to then insert the new quality, get it flowing down the line so that pretty quickly you can, once it passes, you can start putting your original quality back in the pipeline. So it's a big undertaking. There's a lot of safety considerations, and as I said, logistical challenges to all of that.
Now let's look back at Defendant's Exhibit 10 that we had been on, the April 1, 2020 Ethical Rules and Regulations Tariff. When we took a break, you had just read this provision. Remember, we looked at the portion of this provision that referenced not materially affecting the quality of other shipments,
right,
or causing disadvantage to other shippers and or the carriers.
Right.
What would be the effect of putting WTL into the WTI stream?
It goes to kind of what I was just talking about, is that, if someone is putting a WTI, we have WTI in our system. If I don't batch it right and WTL gets mixed into the WTI, it devalues the WTI. Let me give you an example. WTI has the quality specs, as we've talked about, up to 44. So let's just say for a moment I'm running a common stream that has WTI, and that common stream quality is 43.5. If I get too much WTL into that stream, I'm going to convert that entire stream of WTI to a WTL. And then based on what we've already discussed about the value difference between WTI and WTL, I could end up with customers' oil that now has a $3 lower value, and that would be a real problem for me. I certainly would be in trouble with my shippers. A lot of liability there.
Now let's go up above this. Still in the specifications provision, do you see the in with a little caret next to it?
Yes.
Okay. Can you read that sentence?
The minimum segregated batch size for barrels shipped from Group 1 to Group 3 shall be 100,000 barrels per day.
And what is a segregated batch?
So a segregated batch would mean that I want to, so if I'm moving WTI, that I'm going to stop WTI and I'm going to let WTL begin entering the pipeline. And the objective is that I am going to make sure that the quality of oil that I deliver out of my pipeline is the same quality that I receive into my pipeline. So my service is to take WTL in and make sure WTL comes out at the destination points.
And could a small amount of WTL, such as 2,000 barrels, be run as a segregated batch on a pipeline the size of Epic's?
No, there's physical limitations that have to be considered here. So an example be on Medallion's pipeline system, the Medallion Delaware Express. We are we size that pipeline. The pumps we have in there today are capable of moving about 90,000 barrels a day. We have pumps that are set up to move 90,000 barrels a day. When you have pumps that have a high end capacity, it limits your low end, meaning that pump cannot operate on 5 barrels a day. The typical industry standard turn down rate is about 5 to 1. So meaning that the minimum that those pumps would operate at would you just take your maximum and divide it by 5. So on our pipeline system, if top end is 90, then we could probably get those pumps to operate on 18 roughly 1,000 barrels a day. You take a pipeline like Epic, and this makes complete sense to me because at the time, and they may still be a top limit of about 550,000 barrels a day. You divide that by 5, it would mean that those pumps, the minimum they can operate, is about 110,000 barrels a day. That's not a completely accurate calculation, but it's a standard that we use and is common in the industry.
Are you aware of any location in the Permian or Delaware basins where there were 100,000 barrels of WTL for shipment in 2020?
Yes, there was that many barrels on the Oryx pipeline, which is a gathering system similar to Medallion's gathering system in the Midland Basin that had been built in the Delaware Basin.
Has Oryx ever connected its gathering system into the Epic pipeline?
No, it has not.
Are you aware of ARM or Glencore ever nominating WTL for shipment on the Epic pipeline during the time that Epic listed WTL in the specification of its tariff?
No, I'm not.
Let's look at Defendant's Exhibit 11. What is Defendant's Exhibit 11?
It's the Epic Crude Pipeline Rules and Regulations tariff dated December 1st of 2020.
So now we're 8 months forward into time?
Yes.
If we turn to the page that is Bates number, let's first go to the page that is Bates number Medallion 2388. Do you see the WTL Permian Common Stream 2 section?
Yes.
Do you see that there is asterisk, the N, the caret, the asterisk, and the N? Do you see that?
Yes.
All right, let's go to the next page. You see the N asterisk language on the next page of this tariff?
Yes.
What does it say?
Due to prevailing operating conditions, carrier does not currently offer service under this common stream.
How long did Epic maintain this note in its rules and regulations tariff about not offering service under the WTL common stream?
I think it was about 7 months.
So until mid-2021?
Yes.
Okay. Was that after the Medallion terminated the agreements with ARM?
Yes.
Let's look. What we have here, Defendant's Exhibit 11, is the Epic Rules and Regulations tariff dated December 1, 2020. Let's look now at Plaintiff's Exhibit 348. What is Plaintiff's Exhibit 348?
This is Medallion Pipeline Company's Rules and Regulations tariff effective December 4th of 2020.
Did this tariff become effective 3 days after the Epic tariff that we were looking at that added the note that Epic was not offering service under the Permian Common Stream 2?
Yes.
If we turn to page 8 of the Exhibit 348, and let's look at the paragraph that is underneath the list there. Does the Medallion tariff still have the provision that references the Permian Common Stream 2 and Permian Common Stream 1 and Permian Common Stream 2 pursuant to the quality specifications of the Epic tariff?
Yes, it does.
Why did Medallion not revise this paragraph, given the fact that 3 days prior, Epic had changed its tariff to say that it does not currently offer service under Permian Common Stream 2?
But as you can see from this language, it says still pursuant to the quality specifications of the Epic Rules and Regulations tariff. And that was the logic here. This is how this is set up. So the Medallion tariff incorporates the quality specifications of the Epic Rules and Regulations tariff.
Your Honor,
We weren't always.
Your Honor, objection. This testimony needs to be stricken because he's interpreting what the language says. This is incorporated into a contract and he's telling us what it means. This is precisely what they haven't let us do.
Response.
Your Honor, this is
good for the goose is good for the gander.
And Your Honor, I believe
okay.
Or, frankly.
Well, so if Your Honor, I can ask a different question.
Okay.
All right. After Epic's Rules and Regulations tariff revision, Defendant's Exhibit 10, or Defendant's Exhibit 11, which is December 1st, 2020, did Medallion change its Rules and Regulations tariff, because of Epic's change?
No.
Did Medallion know about Epic's change in its Rules and Regulations tariff?
No.
Okay. And was it your understanding that the Medallion tariff would continue to, well, I mean, let me go back to the first page of this document. Let's go back to Plaintiff's Exhibit 348. Did you continue to be the person who was issuing and compiling the Medallion tariffs?
Yes.
Okay. And after December 1, 2020, did you know at any time before the lawsuit was filed that there had been a change to the Epic tariff?
No.
Okay. Let's now go to Defendant's Exhibit 20. And with this, and we're going to change topics and talk a little bit about terminal services. What is Defendant's Exhibit 20?
It's the, excuse me, it's a terminal services agreement between Epic and Medallion, dated April 15th of 2019.
And looking at the page that is base numbered Medallion 2626, who signed this agreement for Medallion?
I did.
Did you read and understand the agreement before signing it?
Yes.
On the first page of the agreement, there is a whereas clause. Do you see that?
Yes.
And you see that there is a reference to the new terminal?
Yes.
Okay. And did you see where it says that Epic will construct, own, and operate a crude oil terminal facility located adjacent to the initial terminal with storage capacity of 4,700,000 barrels of crude petroleum and throughput capacity of 700,000 barrels of crude petroleum per day. Do you see that?
Yes.
Did Medallion send engineers to do an investigation and review Epic's blueprints to make sure that the terminal was going to be built?
No.
Why not?
This was a reputable management team with a reputable private equity backer. They were telling the world what they were going to do, and we believed them.
All right. And you're referring there to Epic?
Yes.
Okay. Let's look on page 2 of the Terminal Services Agreement. Is there a commencement date provision?
Yes.
Okay. What is the commencement date provision?
For the initial terminal, January 1st of 2020, and with respect to the new terminal, June 1st of 2020.
Okay. If we go back now to the whereas clause that we looked at in the first page, does the whereas clause provide a throughput capacity for the initial terminal?
Yes, 400,000 barrels per day.
And does it provide a throughput capacity for the new terminal?
Yes,
And what is that?
700,000 barrels of crude petroleum per day.
We look at Article 3.1 on page 6 of the agreement. And specifically 3.1C and D, are there provisions relating to loading rates?
Yes,
Are there differences in the loading rates that are described in the agreement for the initial terminal and new terminal?
yes. For the initial terminal, it's at least 20,000 barrels per day, or excuse me, per hour. And for the new terminal, 40,000 barrels per hour.
Okay. Now, if we go to Article 3.4D, and specifically little Roman numeral I, do you see a provision about allowed lay time?
Yes.
What was the allowed lay time under this agreement for a nominated volume of 300,000 or more barrels?
36 hours.
How many, at a 20,000 barrel per hour loading rate, how many barrels could be loaded in 36 hours?
720,000 barrels.
To your understanding, was Glencore able to load 720,000 barrels on a ship during the term of this contract?
Yes.
Arms Council may say that these lay time numbers don't really matter because the only consequence of exceeding lay time is demurrage. Are there other consequences of exceeding lay time to your knowledge?
Yeah, so the way this works is that if a ship comes into the terminal and Epic is delayed in loading that ship, then it's on the hook for paying demurrage back to us. And because we did the agreements with ARM, we would be responsible for paying that back to ARM. So unless there's a problem, Epic's going to load this and it's going to push it out within these timelines. It's not going to let it sit there and load any more volume than what's allowed here.
Let's look at Defendant's Exhibit 4. What is Defendant's Exhibit 4?
It's the terminal services agreement between Medallion Pipeline Company and ARM Energy Management.
What is the date of this agreement?
It's dated July 3rd, 2019.
How long is this after the terminal services agreement between Medallion and Epic?
Approximately 2.5 months.
Why did 2.5 months elapse between the two agreements?
Well, we each had to get our attorneys together, and we needed to agree on, go through this in great detail and agree on the terms of the agreement.
If we look at the first whereas clause of the terminal services agreement between Medallion and ARM, we again see the throughput provisions of 400,000 barrels of crude petroleum per day for the initial and 700,000 barrels of crude petroleum per day for the new.
Yes, they're exactly the same.
As the prior agreement?
Yes.
And if we look at Article 3.1 on page 7, does the agreement between Medallion and ARM also have the provisions about loading rates of at least 20,000 barrels per hour at the initial and 40,000 barrels per hour at the new?
Yes.
In Article 3.4D of the agreement between Medallion and ARM, does the agreement still have the same allowed lay times for the initial terminal and the new terminal that we saw in the agreement between Medallion and Epic?
Yes.
What was your understanding as of July 3rd, 2019 about the state of the initial terminal?
It had not been built.
Okay.
I mean, excuse me, it had not been built. It was being, had been built, excuse me. It was the interstate grain dock, the initial one was. So it was an existing dock. It was being renovated for crude oil service, but it did exist.
Okay. And then what was your understanding of the state of the new terminal?
The new terminal is the one that didn't exist at all. It was being built from the ground up.
Did Medallion have any control over Epic's construction of the new terminal?
None at all.
Do you remember that we looked at the definition of commencement date in the terminal services agreement between Medallion and Epic?
Yes.
Is there also a definition of commencement date in the terminal services agreement between Medallion and ARM?
Yes.
Let's look at those two commencement date definitions. The agreement between Medallion and Epic is Defendant's Exhibit 20, and between Medallion and ARM is Defendant's Exhibit 4. Do you see the language from the agreement with Epic?
Yes.
Down and to the left, and with the ARM a little higher up and to the right?
Yes.
Is there any difference in the language between these two agreements?
Yes.
What is the difference?
The difference is with respect to the new terminal, we inserted expected to be January 1st of 2020.
Is that language there for both initial and new? For the in the agreement with ARM?
It is.
Okay. Now let's go to the first sentence.
Wait.
Article-
Maybe I missed something here. So the one that you've highlighted two different portions. One is the commencement date expected to be January 1st, 2020. Which agreement is that out of?
Yes, Mr. Lynn. So which the expected to be which agreement?
Yes, Your Honor. So that one that we have highlighted is the agreement between Medallion and ARM. The one at the bottom is the agreement between Epic and Medallion.
Okay, so the one that says that commencement date means January 1st, and that is between Medallion and ARM.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So the one, just to be clear, Mr. Lentz, can you read the provision that is between Medallion and ARM?
Yes. Commencement date means the date upon which Medallion first received services as defined in the TSA from Epic Crude Terminal with respect to either A, the initial terminal, expected to be January 1st, 2020, or B, the new terminal, expected to be June 1st, 2020.
Okay. And what language is in the agreement with ARM that is not in the agreement with Epic?
Expected to be.
Now let's look at the first sentence of Article 3.4A in Defendant's Exhibit 4, which is the agreement between Medallion and ARM. And I'd like to compare this first sentence with the first sentence of Article 3.4A of the agreement between Medallion and Epic. And specifically focusing on the first sentence. I know we've put up the entire provision, but specifically focusing on the first sentence, is there any difference in the language of the first sentence as between the agreement between Medallion and Epic and the agreement between Medallion and ARM?
Yes.
Okay. What is the difference?
The difference is on the agreement between Medallion and ARM, we inserted subject to the occurrence of the commencement date. Did
Medallion have any control over the occurrence, over the commencement date of the new terminal occurring?
None at all.
Okay. Did Medallion know that the commencement date of the new terminal would occur?
No, we hoped it would occur, but we did not know it would occur.
Looking again at the first sentence of Article 3.4a, and keeping both agreements up, on the agreement with EPIC, you see the phrase, each with the capacity of not more than 1 million barrels of crude petroleum?
Yes.
And did Medallion, is that language also in the agreement between Medallion and ARM?
Yes.
Now, looking specifically at the 3.4a in the agreement between Medallion and ARM, so we can take down the one between Medallion and EPIC. So we're going to keep the one Defendant's Exhibit 4 up, the 3.4a. You see that it says for each month after the initial terminal commencement date, customers shall be entitled to nominate on a firm basis up to one marine vessel, et cetera.
Yes.
Okay. And we looked before at the definition of initial terminal commencement date. Well, we looked at commencement date. We saw what the commencement date was for the initial terminal, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Does the agreement have provisions that address how a customer would nominate a vessel?
Yes.
Okay. Let's look at Exhibit B. Well, before we go to B, sorry, Mr. Spalding, let's look real quick at, is there a section, an Article 3.4c on the same page?
Yes.
What does it provide?
All marine loading of crude petroleum at the new terminal and the initial terminal shall be done in accordance with the terms attached here to as Exhibit B.
Okay. Let's look at Exhibit B. And specifically at the first sentence of Exhibit B. And let's take this a little bit at a time. Can you read everything up to the A?
Yes. To nominate a berth at the initial terminal or the new terminal, collectively the terminals, customer or its agent will give Medallion, its designee, EPIC Crude Terminal, and the Port of Corpus Christi Harbor Master's Office a written nomination notice.
Okay. So were nominations supposed to go just to Medallion and EPIC?
No.
Who else is supposed to receive nominations?
The Port of Corpus Christi,
right? And
Harbor
then,
Master's Office.
okay, and then does the sentence list the information that must be provided in a written nomination notice?
Yes, it does.
What does subsection A provide?
It's a proposal. It's a notice that proposes a 1 to 3 day date range for loading or discharge of a specific vessel. B goes on to, the vessel's name, flag, deadweight, tonnage, length, beam, a lot of information that the Harbor Master's Office would need to ensure that the vessel could come in safely.
And what does C provide?
Provides any additional information or documentation that Medallion or its designee EPIC Crude Terminal reasonably request.
Now let's look at the next sentence of paragraph 1. Of Exhibit B. You see where it says the Port of Corpus Christi handles nomination notices on a first-come, first-served basis. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay, so is that our second reference in this paragraph to the Port of Corpus Christi?
Yes.
Okay. Can you read the next sentence after that one?
Yes. Medallion and its designee EPIC Crude Terminal have the right to refuse approval of a proposed nomination notice for reasons including the vessel nominated and the proposed date range, provided, however, that Medallion and its designee EPIC Crude Terminal's approval will not be unreasonably withheld, conditioned, or delayed.
Did Medallion or EPIC ever refuse approval of a proposed nomination notice under this agreement?
No.
Did ARM or Glencore ever complain to Medallion that Medallion's or Epic's approval of a vessel nomination notice was unreasonably withheld, conditioned, or delayed?
No.
Let's look at Article 3.3C of the Terminal Services Agreement. What does Article 3.3C provide?
Medallion shall exercise commercially reasonable efforts to accommodate and revise or cause to be accommodated and revised nominations submitted by customer.
Did ARM or Glencore ever complain to Medallion that Medallion or Epic acted in a way that was not commercially reasonable in connection with vessel nominations submitted by ARM or Glencore?
No.
Now let's talk a little bit more about the port. Let's go back to and let's stay on exhibit. Let's go back to Exhibit B to do so. And let's look specifically at the first sentence of paragraph 3. What does the first sentence of paragraph 3 say about the port?
After a vessel has arrived at the customary anchorage or place of waiting, received all clearances from governmental authorities, and is otherwise in all respects ready to proceed to berth, commence loading or discharging cargo, it will tender a notice of readiness to Medallion, its designee, Epic Crude Terminal, and the Port of Corpus Christi Harbor Master's Office in writing or via other available means acceptable to Medallion, its designee, Epic Crude Terminal, and the Port of Corpus Christi Harbor Master's Office.
Okay. Did you have an understanding that governmental authorities were going to have to provide clearances?
Certainly.
Look at the first sentence of paragraph 4. First sentence of paragraph 4 says that the Port of Corpus Christi Harbor Master's Office shall designate a safe berth for the vessel at which it can remain safely afloat and conduct cargo operations. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Is this? Did you understand that that was also a requirement of the contract?
Yes.
Okay. And if we look at the last sentence of paragraph 4, what does that say?
All vessels will be dimensionally acceptable and meet all requirements of Medallions or its designee Epic Crude Terminals, wharf facilities, and governmental agencies.
Did ARM or Glencore ever complain to Medallion about Epic or Medallion rejecting a nomination for a vessel that met the requirements of Epic's wharf facilities?
No.
Did ARM or Glencore ever complain to Medallion about Epic or Medallion rejecting a nomination for a vessel that met the requirements of governmental agencies?
No.
If we look back at paragraph 3.4a, remember we look at the phrase each with a capacity of not more than 1 million barrels of crude petroleum.
Yes.
Was that phrase important to Medallion?
Yes.
Why?
We wanted to make it clear,
Objection,
and
Your Honor.
Epic wanted to make.
Objection.
Sustained, objection sustained.
Okay. Was the Epic terminal the only option for ARM or Glencore to load in Corpus Christi?
No.
What other options did ARM or Glencore have for loading vessels in Corpus Christi?
There were a variety of options. Epic was connected to pipelines that would allow its oil to flow to Moda, and there was a free move to Moda under this agreement. It could also go to other points like Pin Oak. So there were various options for loading a vessel.
Would there be any advantages to loading a Moda?
Yes, it was in the outer harbor. My understanding is it doesn't have the same depth restrictions, so you could have brought in theoretically a much larger vessel. That's my understanding from what I've read.
Now let's shift gears a little bit back to WTL. Are you familiar with Salt Creek?
Yes.
Did you learn anything about arms management of Salt Creek prior to this lawsuit?
Yes.
How did you come to have information about arms management of Salt Creek?
In September of 2019, Salt Creek had hired an investment bank, Jeffries, to solicit interest in the party's interest in acquiring the Salt Creek midstream crude oil business. And Jeffries solicited our interest, and we undertook an evaluation of that business.
How long was this after Medallion and ARM entered into their agreements relating to the EPIC capacity?
Approximately 2 months.
What did Medallion do to evaluate the opportunity to acquire Salt Creek?
We put a team together and we reviewed initially the information that they sent us, and then we also had an extensive meeting in person with the Salt Creek management.
Where was that meeting in person with the Salt Creek management?
ARM's offices in Houston.
And who did you attend that meeting?
I did.
Okay. And who attended that meeting from the Salt Creek side?
There was probably 8 to 10 people from Salt Creek. Zach Lee was leading his side, the conversations from his side. Taylor Tipton was also leading some of those discussions. And I believe Mr. Wishoff was there as well.
Okay. Were Mr. Lee, Mr. Tipton, Mr. Wishoff all executives with ARM?
Yes.
You know if there's anybody there for Salt Creek who was not with ARM?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. What role did you take, in addition to attending this meeting, role did you take yourself in evaluating whether Medallion would be interested in acquiring Salt Creek?
I personally did a deep dive into the information they provided and into even many of the contracts between their customers, the customers of Salt Creek, and for moving crude oil on the pipeline system. So just a thorough investigation, and I led our team on the Medallion side.
At the meeting in ARM's offices, who led the talking for ARM?
I say it was 90% Mr. Lee, and then the other was Mr. Tipton.
Can you identify Defendant's Exhibit 557?
Yes, this is a confidential information memorandum that Jeffries sent to us after we signed a non-disclosure agreement regarding the Salt Creek crude oil business.
Let's turn to the last page of Defendant's Exhibit 557. What does this page show?
It shows the management of Salt Creek crude oil midstream.
Okay. And do we see here on the management, we see Zach Lee and we see Taylor Tipton, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then we see between them a fellow named Michael Christopher.
Yes.
And his, for the first bullet point, it refers to his current position at ARM Energy. Do you see that?
Yes.
All right. And then at the top is Gil Burciaga. Do you recall Mr. Wishoff's testimony that he was one of the co-founders of ARM?
Yes.
Let's look at the page in this presentation that is Bates number SCM 291. Do you see up under key points on the left side?
Yes.
Where it says SCM crude is contracted capacity, then there's a redaction on EPIC Crude's pipeline to Corpus Christi, allowing customers access to international crude pricing. EPIC's long-term rate and primary shipper structure equates to minimal MVC risk over term. Do you see that?
Yes.
And just to define our terms, what is MVC?
Minimum volume commitment.
You recall discussing with Salt Creek the capacity, with the ARM folks who were there managing Salt Creek, the capacity that Salt Creek had on EPIC's oil pipelines? Yes. What do you recall about those discussions? They
told us that they had negotiated capacity, they had contracted for capacity on the EPIC pipeline This was capacity that was different than the capacity that they were going to get from Medallion, and that they felt that this, if we acquired the Salt Creek crude oil midstream business, that we should consider acquiring this capacity from them because they fit hand in glove, and that it was a minimal risk, that the minimum volume commitment was shared between 2 or 3 different shippers, including ARM, and so they had mitigated some of the minimum volume risk, but that they wanted us to acquire this also, even though they didn't provide us any great details on this in the presentation.
Did you have any understanding as to whether that agreement between Salt Creek under ARM's management with EPIC preceded or was after the agreement that ARM entered into with Medallion?
Yeah, it was clear to me that it preceded the agreement. It was before the agreement that they had with us.
So we've talked a little bit about Salt Creek's capacity on EPIC. Did anyone from ARM discuss with you Salt Creek's relationship more generally with EPIC?
Yes. There were a number of discussions in the meeting that we had with these guys, where they indicated their close relationship with EPIC because of their common private equity backer, which was Ares.
If we now look at the map that is on this page, you see that there's a map showing an area of acreage dedications in the world's premier unconventional basin.
Yes.
Okay. And there's a couple of blue lines in a red dotted box.
Yes.
Okay. And what did you understand those blue lines to be?
So, I'm sorry, could you?
Yeah. Do you see
big arrows?
Yeah. Do you see the blue line gathering system that is over there in West Texas?
Oh, I'm sorry. I see that as black on my screen.
Maybe right.
So so what's being shown in the red outline box is the Salt Creek crude oil midstream gathering systems. Part of this was built and part of it was not at the time, even though they were referencing it all is completed on the map. But on the west side, so the very left-hand side of that box, that was their Orla gathering system. And on the right-hand side of that box was the what they referred to as Delaware Crossing, which was a JV between assets they had built or were building and assets of Noble. And what's shown in green is the connection points that were proposed, or that they were saying were going to happen between those gathering systems and EPIC.
Was there any connection between the Orla side, the west side, and the Wink side, the east side, on the Salt Creek gathering system?
No.
We see on this map there is a logo for Moda down there along the Gulf Coast. Did ARM tell you anything about Moda?
Yeah, they indicated that in addition to the capacity they had contracted for on the EPIC pipeline, that they also had contracted for dock capacity at Moda.
And is this the same Moda that ARM got a free pump over to in the terminal services agreement with Medallion?
Yes.
Now let's look at the page that is base numbered SCM 294. And let's look in the bottom left. Do you see the first check? Can you read the first check mark here in the Salt Creek presentation?
By securing a significant portion of the limited firm crude takeaway capacity from the Delaware Basin via its relationship with EPIC, as well as contracted dock space, SCM Crude is able to provide guaranteed basin exit to its producer customers.
Do you believe that ARM was basing any evaluation of the firm crude takeaway capacity from EPIC on anything Medallion had told them?
No.
Why not?
They had a close relationship with EPIC and had already contracted for space on EPIC.
Let's look at the page base numbered SCM 302. Do you see the heading in blue up at the top?
Yes.
EPIC crude connection allows producers to flow multiple grades of crude to local and global markets that offer the highest realized pricing?
Yes.
Did ARM ever suggest to you that it was getting its information about EPIC's ability to flow multiple grades of crude from Medallion?
No.
Did you discuss with ARM the fact that EPIC would flow multiple grades of crude oil in connection with this Salt Creek evaluation process?
Yes, in great detail.
What did the folks from ARM say about that?
So we knew that what EPIC was proposing to move or was going to move pursuant to their tariff was WTI and WTL. The detailed discussions came into play because there was a mix of quality on the Orla side of their system that was WTL and condensate, lighter than WTL. And we weren't certain, and it wasn't certain to us based on those qualities and the volume of each of those qualities of either WTL or condensate that when mixed together would meet the WTL quality specs within the EPIC tariff.
Let's look at the page in the presentation that is Bates numbered SCM 290. What is the title of this page?
API gravity across SCM crude system creates the opportunity for crude blending.
Okay. And we've talked a little bit about blending today and actually earlier days in the trial as well. What is blending, just to set the scene?
Yeah, so that's where you, for example, if you have a smaller quality of WTL, which is less valuable than WTI, and a larger quantity of WTI, if you can get the quantities right, you can blend the WTL into the WTI, thus making the WTL barrels as valuable as the WTI that you blended it into.
Does ARM give a list of key points about crude blending?
Yes.
What is the first key point?
SCM crude system is advantageously positioned to take advantage of the Delaware Basin's unique mix of API gravity and fluid composition.
Did the folks from ARM explain that point to you?
Yes.
What did they tell you?
Well, they told us that a couple of things. With respect to the Orla gathering system, that they believed that they could mix the condensate and the WTL together to where the common stream would be WTL. And they also indicated that they could mix WTL with WTI, and we had problems with the logic around both of those things.
Did you know that Mr. Gustafson testified yesterday that blending WTL into WTI destroys value?
I saw that. It only destroys the value of the WTI, in my opinion.
Okay. You mentioned that the Medallion had some problems with both blending concepts. What was the issue with the concept of blending the condensate into the WTL in order to get a WTL stream?
There was not a clear plan for how they were going to even know the quantities of condensate and WTL that would be produced from those customers at any particular time to ensure that the common stream would be WTL. And they didn't show that they were investing capital for tankage that would allow them to segregate condensate and WTL such that they could run each one of those qualities as a batch stream. And even if they had that capability, there was nothing in EPIC's tariff that would indicate that EPIC would receive a batch stream of condensate.
And then what was the problem with blending the WTL into the WTI in order to make WTI?
Well, it's a source of WTI. These two systems aren't connected together. As you can see from the map,
let's look at the map on the bottom left.
So this map, this illustration is showing you basically WTI and WTL or condensate exist in the ground. So the darker colors you can see are on the right-hand side of the system. That's what they call their Delaware crossing system. And due to the darker colors, you can see that Gravity ranges from 40 up to 44. Gets close in some places to a 45. But if you look at over on the other side, you can see that's certainly WTL because of the lighter green colors and even getting into yellow, which is condensate.
Right. When you're saying the other side, you're referring to the west side of the gathering system?
Right. So those two systems aren't connected together. So the common stream, we believe from looking at it, that the common stream on the right-hand side, Delaware Crossing, was in fact going to be WTI. But you can't, because there's no physical connection here, you can't get the condensate and WTL from Orla over to Delaware Crossing. So we didn't know where they were going to come up with the WTI for blending.
Did the folks from ARM ever suggest to you that actually the best way to make money from the lighter crudes would be to export them to Asia for use in refineries over there?
No.
Let's look at the last key point on this page. What does the last key point say?
Customers in the vicinity of the Wink terminal produce high-quality crude with an API gravity in the low 40s, complementing the high 40s API gravity of customers in the vicinity of the Orla terminal.
And what type of crude is high-quality crude with an API gravity in the low 40s?
WTI.
Okay. And then high 40s is what grade of crude?
WTL.
Okay. Were you confident in Salt Creek's statement that it would have high 40s API gravity in the vicinity of the Orla terminal?
Yes.
Okay. Were you confident that the overall stream would be in the high 40s?
Yes, based on the information we had.
Okay. Was there also crude oil that over there that was in the 50s?
Not to my knowledge. There's little spots that you can see where there's a little bit lighter green. So it's possible that there could have been small pockets of that. But as you can see from the illustration here, it certainly wouldn't be enough to make the common stream WTL. It would be a common stream WTI.
Over on the Wink side?
Yes.
Right. So now let's talk about the Orla side too. Do you see the reference to the high 40s API gravity of customers in the vicinity of the Orla terminal?
Yes.
Did you have confidence in Salt Creek's ability to manage the quality stream over in the Orla terminal to create a WTL?
No. We knew it was going to be WTL and condensate, but we did not have confidence that they could maintain a common stream WTL. Certainly wouldn't be WTI.
Your Honor, I move admission of Defendant's Exhibit 557.
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, Defendant 557 is admitted.
So we can take down 557. Did Medallion decide to buy Salt Creek?
No.
Why not?
Well, we just couldn't work through the logic in our head. There were a number of different red flags that we saw in investing in this crude oil gathering system.
Can you describe those red flags?
Yes. The first one is that they had, based on what they had built to date, they had spent a lot of money and were significantly over budget. In our opinion, they were attempting to expedite construction of the pipeline, which was adding additional cost. And the reason they were trying to expedite that brings me to kind of a second red flag, which was they had provisions in their agreements with their customers they had contracted with that they would be there at a certain time, and they were not meeting that timeline. And in fact, they were paying some of these customers delay fees, which was adding to the capital. And I was still not certain, third flag, that was going to keep them from being in breach of these contracts. And then,
Objection,
you know,
Your
kind of
Honor,
number four.
Your Honor, objection. I've given this a lot of leeway for something that is entirely irrelevant to these contracts in this lawsuit. But now he's getting into interpreting contracts that aren't the subject of this lawsuit and that he has no foundation for.
But what is the relevance of this, Mr. Carter?
Yeah, the relevance of this is that Salt Creek, which was operating hand in glove with ARM, did not have WTL and did not have a plan for WTL.
I think we've gone far enough on this. I'll sustain the objection to this particular question.
Okay. I want to go back to the reciprocal capacity lease agreement now, which is Defendant's Exhibit 19. Do you see Article 7.1 on page 19 of the agreement?
Yes.
What is Article 7.1 saying?
That at any time, the Medallion can provide notice to EPIC at any time between the effective date and the EPIC pipeline commencement date to receive a one-time payment from EPIC of $69 million, the option payment, in return for Medallion's relinquishment of all of its rights to the Medallion lease capacity.
Okay. And we already discussed that the EPIC pipeline commencement date was April 1, 2020. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did Medallion exercise its option to receive $69 million from EPIC before April 1, 2020?
No.
Why not?
We chose instead to accept doing the deal with ARM.
Before Medallion lost that option on April 1, 2020, did Mr. Lee or Mr. Tipton or Mr. Wishoff pick up the phone and tell you that ARM did not have any viable suppliers lined up to fill the EPIC pipeline capacity?
No.
Let's look now at Plaintiff's Exhibit 116. Plaintiff's Exhibit 116. And specifically, the portion of this that is the October 5, 2020 letter that's been discussed some in the case.
Yes.
Yeah. What was happening in the crude oil transportation markets at this time?
This was October of 2020. We were still in COVID. Price had recovered some, but it was still very low. Consequently, volumes being produced from the producing community were low. The market rates on pipeline capacity between the Permian Basin and Corpus Christi had collapsed because there wasn't as much demand. So it was still not in good shape.
ARM and Glencore write that they are requesting the assistance of Medallion Pipeline Company. Do you see that?
I do.
Was Medallion willing to provide assistance?
Yes.
Okay. In the next paragraph, you see the last phrase there that we ask that Medallion push back against the EPIC entities or risk a default.
Yes.
Under the agreements. Before March 2021, to your knowledge, did ARM or Glencore ever send Medallion a letter saying that Medallion had defaulted?
No.
The first issue addressed in this letter is demurrage. Look at the demurrage section real quick. Do you understand ARM to be asserting any claims in this case relating to demurrage?
No.
The second section relates to capacity and terminal rights. I want to just ask you about a few portions of this section. Do you see where the bottom paragraph begins with the second sentence says, indeed, since the commencement date, customer has been unable to commit to a maximum load volume on a vessel of more than 720,000 barrels due to draft restrictions of the terminal and the standard chartering window being much later than the nomination dates for the vessel, for the pipeline and vessel laycans.
Yes.
Okay. Did that statement surprise you?
I was aware of no, it did not, actually.
Why not?
Well, the 720, remembering the calculation, ties out to the initial terminal based on the load rate and the lay time.
Okay. And had you been aware that there were draft restrictions at the terminal?
Yes.
Okay. And how were you aware of that?
Well, the Port of Corpus Christi had been pretty clear that they were still not done dredging the Port of Corpus Christi, and we knew that larger vessels couldn't come in and load, large quantities because of that.
And then there's a statement in here about the standard chartering window being much later than the nomination date for the pipeline and vessel laycans. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you recall ever getting any information from ARM and Glencore about what the problem was with contractual or other provisions for the standard chartering window?
No, this chartering window is out of our control, and it's something that Epic provides, and I didn't see where this was a problem.
If we go down, you see the sentence that begins, as a result. As a result, customer has been assessed incremental storage fees for crude oil that is not loaded or is required to sell crude oil at the terminal or excess pipeline capacity at distressed pricing levels. Do you see that?
Yes.
Have you ever seen any documentation of that?
No.
Okay. The next sentence, the next section of the letter relates to fees for mid-month nominations. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you understand ARM to be asserting any claims in this case relating to having to pay for late nominations?
No.
Or for mid-month nominations?
No.
Next section relates to shipment of WTL, Permian Common Stream 2. Do you see that?
Yes.
If we go down to the third paragraph under that one, you see the paragraph that says, until Epic Crude Pipeline LP revises its tariff to exclude the transportation of crude oil that meets the specifications in the tariff, customer is permitted to ship such crude. Do you see that?
Yes.
Did Epic revise its tariff?
Ultimately, it did.
Okay. And when was that?
It was in December of 19.
Okay. Then it says, if, however, the tariff is revised to exclude the transportation of West Texas Light, customer has the right to challenge any such revisions, and we encourage Medallion to do the same, as such change would reduce the value of Medallion's lease capacity rights. Do you see that?
I do.
Did Medallion challenge the revision?
No.
Why not?
I wasn't aware of Epic ever rejecting a properly submitted nomination, and we needed more information. We weren't involved in this. They were communicating directly with Epic, and we needed information to understand what they were referring to. I was a bit confused by this.
Okay. And are you aware of customer, ARM, or Glencore challenging any Epic tariff revisions?
No.
Okay. The next section of this letter relates to Epic origin points and destination points. Do you understand ARM to be making any claim in this case relating to this issue?
No.
Now let's look at Defendant's Exhibit 272. And you see on the first page that there's an email that is sent from Brock DeGetter of Medallion to Taylor Tipton and Andrew McNamara of Glencore.
Yes.
Who's Brock DeGetter?
He's Medallion's general counsel.
Okay. And is there a letter attached?
Yes.
Okay. And what was the purpose of the letter?
To acknowledge receipt of their letter and to try to clarify some things.
Okay. In the second paragraph of the letter, you see where it says, given the fact that customer has been interfacing and communicating directly with Epic on these matters to date, we will require your cooperation and assistance in certain additional documentation in order to successfully address a number of the concerns you raised in the letter. You see that? Did Medallion ever tell ARM or Glencore that they could not communicate directly with Epic?
No.
Did ARM and Glencore ever dispute that they had been interfacing and communicating directly with Epic on these matters to date?
No.
What did you see as Medallion's role in connection with these issues?
We certainly wanted to try to get to the bottom of this. We were somewhat confused by the letter. We wanted to get more information so that we could help figure these issues out.
Okay. If we go down a little further, there's a sentence that says, also please provide us with any invoices that you may have received from Epic for marine loading pursuant to section 3.4 of the Terminal Services Agreement, including any storage fees associated with deliveries in excess of the actual marine loading capacity of Epic Crude Terminal. Do you see that?
Yes.
Are you aware of ARM or Glencore ever providing Medallion with any invoices or documentation in response to that request?
No.
And a couple sentences down, there's a sentence that says, also, please provide any documentation indicating that customer has attempted to nominate shipments of West Texas Light, WTL, crude oil on Epic's crude pipeline, or any documentation evidencing Epic's rejection of any attempted shipments of WTL on the basis that services relating to such shipments are not currently available, or that the crude oil fails to meet the quality specifications for shipments on Epic's crude oil pipeline. Did ARM and Glencore, to your knowledge, ever provide any documentation of nominations of WTL or rejections of nominations?
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you. There
Yeah,
seems to be
does somebody have a TV on or something? I'm hearing like what sounds like a TV. Okay, it seems to have stopped. Let's keep going.
So we looked at that sentence. Did ARM or Glencore, to your knowledge, ever provide any documentation of nominations of WTL or rejections of nominations?
No.
What did Medallion do with the letter from ARM and Glencore?
We sent it to Epic and asked them to give us, to look at it and respond back to us so that we could get a better understanding from their side of these assertions by Glencore.
Did Medallion get a response from Epic?
Yes.
Let's look at Defendant's Exhibit 26. What is Defendant's Exhibit 26?
This is from Brock to ARM, and he's saying he's attached additional correspondence related to the Epic Crude Pipeline and Epic Crude Terminal.
Okay. If we go to the next page of Defendant's Exhibit 26, do we see the letter from Medallion to Taylor Tipton of ARM and Andrew McNamara of Glencore?
Yes.
In the letter from Medallion, if we look at the second paragraph, is there a reference there to the October 8th letter that we just looked at?
Yes.
Okay. And can you read that first couple sentences of this paragraph?
Yes. In my initial response to you dated October 8th, Medallion requested additional documentation from AEM and Glencore to substantiate certain factual allegations set forth in the Glencore letter. To date, we have not received any further information from AEM or Glencore. Therefore, to successfully rebut certain of the arguments set forth in the Epic letter, we will reiterate several of our original requests for additional information.
And then are there some bullet points listing some requests for additional information?
Yes.
Okay. Including on the third bullet point, there a request for copies of documentation indicating the customer has attempted to nominate shipments of WTL crude oil on Epic's crude oil pipeline?
Yes.
And are you aware of ARM or Glencore ever providing that information?
No.
Okay. In fact, did Medallion ever get a reply to this letter from ARM or Glencore?
No, we never received anything other than silence.
Okay, and then Was there a letter from Epic that was attached to this letter from Medallion?
Yes.
Okay. So if we just kind of scroll through and look, is this the letter from Epic that Medallion had received from Epic?
Yes.
Okay. Did Medallion ever get any of the necessary supporting documentation from ARM or Glencore?
No.
Okay. We can take down that exhibit. Around about this time, November 2021, was Medallion engaged in discussions with Epic about any business matters?
Yes.
Okay, what were those discussions about?
We had a number of operational items going on with Epic, and we were discussing with them some measurement problems. We were discussing with them still working out some of cost sharing or other agreements related to the Harrington station. There was a non-ratable issue where Reliance was delivering into our gathering system. We wanted to discuss that with them, so just a variety of issues.
Did Medallion resolve the concerns raised by ARM and Glencore in the discussions Medallion was having with Epic on other matters?
Sorry, repeat that?
So you just described some business discussions that were happening between Medallion and Epic in November 2020, and we see that there also was this letter back from Epic responding to ARM and Glencore's letter at the same time, around the same time. So did Medallion resolve the ARM and Glencore issues at the same time that it was resolving the business issues that it had with Epic?
No, we didn't have any information, again, from Glencore and ARM. Epic had provided their response, and we needed ARM and Glencore to cooperate, to provide us with information, call us, work with us in some way where we could resolve these items.
Let's look at Defendant's Exhibit 61. You see Defendant's Exhibit 61, a series of emails from the very end of 2020?
Yes.
Okay. You see that Aaron Dunn of Glencore writes an email to the Medallion scheduling team?
Yes.
Okay, relating to a January WTL nomination?
Yes.
All right, and we'll look at that January WTL nomination shortly. You see where she writes that it is Glencore's position that no provision in the Transportation Services Agreement between Medallion and Glencore as assignee or the relevant tariffs preclude Glencore from shipping WTL. Do you see that?
Yes.
By this point, had Epic amended its rules and regulations tariff with respect to the WTL specification?
Yes.
Okay. In the next paragraph of the email, Ms. Dunn writes that Glencore reserves all of its rights and defenses.
Oh, wait, can I ask? I need to ask a quick question. So I want to make sure I understand the timeline here. So ARM complains to Epic that they can't ship I'm simplifying this a little bit, that they can't ship WTL because it's not in the tariff for Epic. And then in response to that, does Epic amend its tariff to allow them to ship WTL?
This was after they had already removed that provision from their tariff.
Okay, yeah, okay. So they had already removed that provision, and Epic was allowing WTL to be shipped then.
No, I think that's the point, is that Epic was not allowing WTL to be shipped. They had removed it from their tariff, but they later amend that, correct, to allow WTL to be shipped? Am I misunderstanding that? Yes, sir, after the agreements were terminated.
After the agreement was terminated, then they amended. Okay, I got the timeline. Go ahead. Oh, actually, you know what? We need to go ahead and break for now. So let's chat real quick. Were you guys able to figure out if you could get me the depositions?
Yes, they are either there or on their way.
Okay. So who is going to be in charge? I don't want to disrupt everyone's schedule. So who is going to be in charge of arguing the deposition objections for the plaintiff?
I will, Your Honor.
Is that Ms. Shee?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and who will be arguing this for defense counsel?
Your Honor, I will, and Mr. Downs will help me.
Okay, so this is the situation. So what I'd like to do ideally